at 8:05, we'll call the Committee on Appointments to order. Okay, so we have about 6 items on our agenda for the new year. Our first item is a resolution. We don't do roll call, do we?
Nope.
Okay, so our first item is a resolution approving the City Commission's appointment of Lisa McManus to the Historic Preservation Commission.
So moved.
All right, all those in favor?
You'll have to support it.
Excuse me, support. I support that.
And then, Mr. Chair, if I can make a little comment?
Yes.
Sometimes we do that depending on the item, but Ms. McManus is a Heritage Hill neighbor, is very active in the neighborhood, and I think will bring a good voice to this body. A lot of specific understanding and knowledge, so I appreciate her willingness to serve.
Wonderful. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It carries. That'll move us to our next item. It's a resolution approving the City Commission's appointment of Jennifer Williams to the Grand Rapids Water System Advisory Council.
So moved.
Support. And any comments on that one? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
It carries. That will move us to our next item. Oh, excuse me. Any opposed? It carries. There we go. It's funny with just 2 of us here. Moves us to our next resolution, which is a resolution approving the City Commission's appointment of Hannah Mico to the Urban Forestry Committee.
So moved.
All right. Support.
Mr. Chair, I'll add that Ms. Mico has been, I believe this is a reappointment to the Urban Forestry Committee, has also served on a number of other roles, and appreciate the continued service.
Yes, likewise. Hannah has worked with me in different spaces, and happy to see her continue her service. Hey, Commissioner. And how about, you want to wait to vote on this one? Okay, so we are only on our third one, and that's a resolution approving the City Commission's appointment of Hannah Mico to the Urban Forestry Committee.
So moved.
All right.
We're past that point.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It carries. Wonderful. And that brings us to our fourth. This is a resolution confirming Mayor LeGrand's appointment of Paul Helm to the City Planning Commission.
So moved.
Support.
Okie dokie. Any comments on that?
Mr. Chair, I believe this is a new appointment. Is that correct, Becky? So, and this signifies we've really been keeping members of the Planning Commission on. They do the bylaws, or the ordinance language calls for replacements, or it can be open until a replacement is found. We were working to make sure that we had some continuity for the master planning process. Now that we're in this next phase of now executing it, I'm glad that Mr. Helm will be serving on the body.
Wonderful. Awesome. Okie dokie. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It carries. Lastly, we have a resolution confirming Mayor LeGrand's appointment of Kyle Van Shrine to the Economic Development Corporation and Brownfield Redevelopment Authority.
So moved.
Support.
All right. Any comments on this appointment?
Just one thing. It didn't get it put into the title, but it is in the that board is also the Land Bank Authority at the current time.
Okay.
So so he's also will be appointed that. It's in the resolution, but it's not in the title here. Just want to make sure we're clear on that. And speaking of someone who was on the Planning Commission until we got to the master plan in his it's this new role.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Great.
I was just going to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk. Okie dokie. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It carries. And then that takes us to our last item here, which is current board and commission vacancy list.
Mr. Chair, as the city clerk is scrolling through here, I know you all talked, but I can just give a couple of highlights if that is helpful. So typically, one of the things that we do, which is not necessarily written on this item on the agenda, is we do look at the evening or the afternoon agenda to see who may have resigned. And I think in this meeting, we do have 2 resignations. I can't remember what they're for, but I do believe we have 2 resignations. So we typically call that out so we can put that, know that we'll see that in this full body. And then, I think all of the boards are important, but certainly some of them rise to a different level, like like the Board of Zoning Appeals or the Planning Commission, because we know that individuals have an item that may become before us. And so really making sure that those bodies are fully staffed is very important. Some serve in more advisory roles. But I think in the last couple of months, Commissioner Robbins, I think you'd agree, Ms. Basker had really been working to update those PIFs, get that information to us, spent a lot of time getting those year-end appointments. So I think we're sitting in a positive spot. The goal, of course, as we get those PIFs is, continuing to have a reflection of our city residents. Not all boards obviously require a city residency, but I think that has always been a priority or is typically outlined. And you have served on roles as well. So we sometimes will go board by board, but sometimes not, depending on what we have. I think this meeting has lasted anywhere between 1 minute to 25 minutes. So we usually have more than enough time. So I just wanted to offer that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Commissioner. And we did receive 2 communications regarding resignations. One for the Uptown Corridor Improvement Authority and Uptown Business Improvement District. An additional resignation for the South Division Granville Avenue Corridor Improvement Authority as well. So we will be looking to fill those and our other vacancies. Looking forward to that. Commissioner?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to highlight Ms. Dendrink's resignation from the South Division Granville Corridor Improvement Authority Board. I know she's been on that since the inception and has done an awesome job of being involved. So we'll certainly miss her presence on that body, but did talk with Commissioner Belchak yesterday about talking about finding her replacement. So grateful to have her for the time that she served, but we'll be putting our heads to the ground finding some more people for that. So
Wonderful. Thank you, Commissioner. Any further comments from city staff or commissioners?
Can we just scroll through it, because it's been a minute since I have looked at this. Probably the one that is highlighted with quite a bit is the Community Relations Commission. We did have some PIFs at the end of last year. I think the concern was we had kind of over-indexed in one ward, and we wanted and not as many residents as I think would be reflective of this body. So that's one I think to keep our eye on. And I know that a lot of our colleagues, I know that you and Commissioner Perdue connected prior about the Housing Appeals Board, because you all do have a third ward appointment that's been open for a little bit of time. The Brownfield will now be filled with Mr. Van Stryen, if you can continue to go down. Probably the Housing Appeals Board is another one to highlight. These are alternates, but this is a pretty involved board, and typically they'll have to go out to a site, do a review, and then come back and do that work. Mobile GR, I guess I was surprised that there were a couple on there, because I thought we had filled a couple at the end of the year. Am I remembering that correct, Becky? Or
yeah, I think so.
Mayor LeGrand was
correct?
Taking kind of your spot, right?
Yep.
Okay.
I was just going to ask if that was incorporated into this 2 openings right here.
It is.
Okay.
I know that there were a few people who weren't reappointed just
Okay.
across the different boards.
Okay.
And there will be some more resignations coming up next week. Just, I think, normal new year attrition plans change.
Sure.
And, okay.
So I'll verify all that and clean
Okay.
it up. But I believe that is accurate.
Okay.
I see Ms. Smith is in the audience. Is there anything that you want to add on this one, Ms. Smith? Sorry to put you on the spot, but you're at the meeting.
Good morning, Commissioners. So at the Mobile GR Commission, we did have some folks roll off from last year. A clarification from the clerk, though, we were not sure if the mayor's appointment to the commission was to replace Commissioner Robbins, or was it in addition to, because we still have an opening even with that. We would have 2 openings if it was a replacement, but I didn't think your time was up yet.
From my understanding, it's a replacement, but I will clarify that with him.
Okay, yeah.
That from the conversations I've had, that was the intent.
Okay, and the other point of clarification is, if it was just meant to be an ad, because we did have 2 open spots, can you have 2 commissioners on the Mobile GR Commission? I didn't find anything in the code that said you couldn't, or you could either way, so that would be something to consider. So
Sure.
if that was a replacement, that means I have 2 openings. If it wasn't, that means I have 1. Does that help?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
You bet.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Ms. Smith.
Wonderful. So as the year goes on, we'll look into more of those openings, and I believe Becky is doing sort of an audit of our boards, and also not only filling these roles, but we also want to have a focus on making sure onboarding is consistent for our boards, and so much more. So we've got a fun year ahead of us, and if there are, yes, Commissioner Isasi.
I'd also like to highlight the Urban Agricultural Committee. Were you going to just say that?
That was mine, so go
Okay, well, I was faster than you. So we obviously had, well, not obviously, but a reminder that we had a proposal, and then it was voted on our last meeting for the makeup. And so we should just update that to reflect the change in terms of the specific.
It's on tonight.
It's on tonight, I'm sorry.
It's on this
Oh.
afternoon. It was-
Yeah, that's right. Oh, it was a hearing. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so you guys are not behind.
Yes, and
You
I
never
served on that board, so very happy to see that be sort of reconfigured. And I think that'll be a good thing moving forward, is looking at the specific requirements for some of these boards so that they can have quorum and have some action items and things going on rather than not having quorum. So that was a good change for urban agriculture. Commissioner Robbins?
Yeah, just one other question too. Becky, is there at any point during our new colleagues onboarding, is there an overview of what the commissioner-specific appointments are for each individual, or could that be something? Just because I know in talking with Commissioner Belcheck yesterday, I gave her a brief overview of what appointments she has specifically, but maybe some information from the team might be helpful too.
Yes, I think that it's only been that casual, brief overview.
Cool. Okay.
So far, just by peers.
Sure.
But I can send an email, an intentional list, letting them know where everything stands. I know that Commissioner Belcheck has a public safety
Yes.
committee appointment that should hopefully be on the next meeting agenda. So at least get that one going. I think other than the other is that Affordable Housing Fund. That's another commissioner-specific appointment that we've been
Yeah,
kind
and
of working
then
on.
Civilian Appeals Board, I think too.
That's
Nope.
mayor. No.
That one was the mayor appointed. Commissioner O'Connor appointed someone in like the last meeting for his position.
Okay.
So
Okay.
That one is, I think that one was a mayoral.
Okay. Thank you.
I think the appointments committee and Mayor Bliss and Mayor LeGrand together, filling all these positions. This is, I think, about the shortest list we've had in a long time, especially at the beginning of a new term. Usually this list is probably a whole nother page. So I think this committee, over the last year or so, has done a good job of getting these filled through, and I'm thankful to all the departments that have been helping getting the vetting done quickly too, so we can get these filled in. So I think we've got through all the backlog and things that we've been working on, because we were pushing through a lot of stuff at one time. So I think in that spirit of collaboration, which is one of our values as a city, getting through this process has been fantastic.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Commissioner Robbins. That's
Yeah.
a good idea. All right. Any other comments? Questions, concerns? All right. Then we will close the Committee on Appointments at 8:18 a.m.
Morning, everybody. Happy 2025. It's 8:30 in the morning. We'll go ahead and get our fiscal committee meeting underway here. We just have 5 items before us this morning. So jumping right in with item number 1 on our agenda, we've got a resolution approving an amendment to an agreement with the United States Geological Survey for a river level gauge and water quality station at North Park Street Bridge in the amount of $72,300.
So moved.
Is there support?
Support.
Perfect. Thank you. We got moved and supported. Mr. Berkman, welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you. Yes, we've been working with the U.S. Geological Survey to have this river level gauge and water quality station on the Grand River up at the North Park Street Bridge since 2019. The monitoring station provides important information to parks, environmental services, as well as engineering as we evaluate projects and operations along the Grand River. That previous joint funding agreement that was initiated in 2019 expired at the end of last year, and so we're seeking your approval to extend this agreement through September of 2027 at that cost of $72,300 to continue that monitoring. And the funding for this will be split between parks, the sanitary sewer system, and stormwater.
Okay, thanks. Any questions on that, colleagues? All right, hearing and seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. Thank you. Item number 2, we've got a resolution approving an agreement with Auto Agent Data Solutions, LLC, to use their escrow cloud platform for a 1-year term with the option for 2 1-year renewal terms at no cost to the city of Grand Rapids.
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
With this item today that we bring forward, we've worked with this partnership with Auto Agent since 2013. They've been an exceptional partner with us. What they do is they help mortgage companies, escrow companies to interact with the city when they're making their property tax payments. And so what it's done is actually streamlines the process to where it minimizes duplicate payments. So a lot of times title companies and escrow companies or taxpayers might be sending in duplicate checks for their bills. By making this a lockdown for us, that means it minimizes the number of duplicate payments that we have to process through, which is a very arduous process. And so we are one of the gold star clients with Escrow Cloud Service and Auto Agent. We're kind of the shining example in the state of Michigan where other municipalities have actually jumped on board with us to find out how revolutionary their service was. And so we're just asking for this agreement to be put in place, and we'll continue to do that as we continue our work.
Great, thanks. Colleagues, any questions on that one? All right, hearing none. I just have one quick question. What's the arrangement for the 2 additional year terms at no cost to the city of Grand Rapids? I guess what's the advantage of just doing it 1 year at a time versus like the full 3 if there's no additional cost?
It's predominantly just our standard contract. And so
Okay.
really what we always want to do is have the option that if something better does come along,
Sure.
or if something happens, what if there's a data breach at this company? We want to be able to exit that contract and not renew it and search for other potential candidates to work with us.
Got it. Makes total sense. Thanks. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. Item number 3, we've got our bid list resolution for January 14th, 2025.
So moved.
Support.
All right. Moved and supported.
Good morning, Commissioners. We have
Good morning.
15 items this morning, all pretty routine in nature. Myself or the staff are here, though, if you do have a question on any individual one.
Okay. Thanks. Questions or comments? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. That will bring us to item number 4. We've got our comptroller's warrant report for the period of December 3rd, 2024 through December 30th, 2024 in the amount of $63,177,655.62 and our monthly travel report.
So moved.
Support.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning, Mr. Comptroller.
For the period referenced, we released cash payments totaling approximately $63.1 million. That includes just under $11.5 million for employee payroll expense and approximately $472,000 for income tax warrants. In terms of quantity, 528 income tax refunds were issued and 2,187 accounts payable checks were issued. And as always, the tables on the following pages contain the details of all the payments over $20,000. And then also this morning, we have our November fiscal year-to-date travel report, which details travel spend by department for the first 5 months of the fiscal year. And that report is showing that we spent $706,000 on an overall budget of approximately $3.1 million. And that concludes the reports that I have this morning.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, any questions or comments? All right, hearing none. And City Clerk, we don't need do we need a vote on this one? Nope, okay. Great. And then so lastly, that'll take us to number 5. We've just got our treasurer's report for the period of November 21st, 2024 through December 26th, 2024.
So move.
Support?
All right.
Good morning, Commissioners. With our treasurer's report this period, we're showing that with the market activity, inflation's stubborn right now. We saw a really strong jobs report last week. The market is signaling that we're not going to see lower interest rates in the next meeting. They're only looking to move by 0.25%. Really, it's not going to take place until we see more economic conditions change. With the inauguration coming up and new policies being created, I'm sure there's going to be some turmoil in the market. We don't know what that's going to be. We've seen it in December where people were selling and taking profits. Now they're reinvesting again. And so these market moves are going to be pretty interesting, I should say. It always is in an election year. But really, the market is predicting and showing that there's not going to be any great change in interest rates. So with our report today, we do have $747 million in cash in our bank and investments, and it's earning 3.6% on average.
Okay, great. Questions or comments, colleagues? All right, hearing and seeing none. So that will conclude our regularly scheduled business here this morning. We'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 8:36, and then we'll see some of you back in here at 9:15 for our community development meeting.
The time is now 9:20, and we're going to go ahead and call this Community Development Committee meeting to order. Good morning, colleagues. Nice to be joining this committee, and welcome Commissioner Belshak to your first committee meeting. Or I think it's your first committee meeting. So, all right. So we have a number of items today. First is a resolution approving a fireworks discharge permit for Feld Entertainment, Inc., DBA Disney on Ice, Jurassic World Live, Ringley Bros Circus for special effects at the Van Andel Arena in connection with Disney on Ice Into the Magic, February 6th through the 9th, 2025. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved. Commissioner Belshak, do you support that?
I support.
It's been moved and supported. Do we have, you want to add anything to this item?
Oh, it's Disney on Ice. They got a lot of handheld effects and stuff like that. So, I mean, quite a mouthful to say for you, though.
Yes, I know. I just gave them a commercial. I'll be looking for a kickback. So, all right. Hearing no other comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Next is a resolution approving a fireworks discharge permit for High Tech Special Effects, Inc. for special effects at the Van Andel Arena in conjunction with Winter Jam 2025 featuring Skillet WJ Tour 2025 on January 19th, 2025.
So moved.
It's been moved and supported.
Okay. Simple,
Same
easy pyro on this one.
Okay, great. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Next is item number 3, a resolution approving a fireworks discharge permit for World of Winter events for outdoor special effects performing at Fire and Ice in conjunction with the World of Winter Festival on January 15, 2025.
So moved. Support.
Moved and supported. Any other comments?
This is an odd one. What the fire performers are using like a podium and in a poi kind of scenario where they're swinging it around. So that's the lycopodium is the pyrotechnic material that had to been approved by you guys.
Okay. All right. We've learned here quite a bit about this. So, all right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Next is item number 4, a resolution approving a fireworks discharge permit for Pyrotech Special Effects, Inc. for special effects at the Van Andel Arena in conjunction with the Kelsey Ballerini concert performing on January 19th, 21st of 2025.
So moved. Support.
Moved and supported. I think I got the name wrong, but forgive me.
Kelsey
Oh, I got it right?
Ballerini.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing out of the ordinary, just a lot of pyro.
Okay. I only know one Kelsey, so, all right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item number 5 is a resolution, thank you. Item number 5 is a resolution awarding a contract with Dykema Excavators, Inc. for water main installation in Leonard Street from Winterwood Drive Private to Crahan Avenue and Crahan Avenue from Bradford Street to Leonard Street in the amount of $1,415,339.15 with a total amount not to exceed $1,880,451.
So moved. Support.
Mr. Berkman, do you have any comments on this one?
Yes, good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
So this project will install water main along Leonard and Crahan, the limits that were just read. This is within Grand Rapids Township, and it'll connect existing dead ends of water main that's out there today to loop that area. And looping provides better redundancy, water quality, because you've got continuous flow then through that section of main. 4 bids were received to construct the project. Dykema provided that low bid of just over $1.4 million, which was under our engineer's estimate of about $1.59 million. So requesting your approval of the contract award to Dykema, and then total authorization of expenditures in that amount that was read of $1,880,451. So when we bring these construction awards to you, you always see 2 amounts. The first is what the actual contract amount with the contractor is, and then the second, not to exceed, rolls in the other costs of the project. So design engineering, construction engineering, contingencies, our department's administration, and so that's why you see those separate amounts. That not to exceed total would then come from the water system fund.
Okay. Mr. Berkman, as you mentioned, these were new lines. How many subscribers for Grand Rapids Township does that add then? Do you know?
This will provide stubs into 2 subdivisions out there for future connections. I see
Phoning a friend?
Mr. Jernberg's probably got the exact number off the top of his head, our water system manager.
Thank you.
Actually, this is not going to be adding many customers to it.
Okay.
This goes around for the formerly Grand Rapids Golf Club area.
Okay.
And as part of the comprehensive master plan for Grand Rapids Township is to loop this and eventually at some point add an elevated storage facility there, because that is one of our lowest pressure areas that we have in terms of elevation and pressures.
Okay. Thanks so much. Thanks for that detail. All right. Hearing no other comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item number 6 is a resolution awarding a contract with Pitch Companies for Division Street Fire Station demolition in the amount of $234,000 with total amount not to exceed $273,280.
So moved.
It's been moved?
Support.
Been moved and supported?
We received 3 bids to demolish the Division Street Fire Station. Pitch provided that low bid of $234,000, well under the engineer's estimate of $670,000. So requesting for your approval of the award to Pitch and that authorization of expenditures of $273,280 will largely be covered. $250,000 of that will be covered with a blight elimination program grant, and then the balance of that will come from the capital improvement fund. We will be bringing back to you probably in February or March a construction management agreement that'll help us get to construction and through construction, but wanted to bring forward this demolition contract and make use of that blight elimination program grant.
Great, thank you for this update. Colleagues, do you have any questions for Mr. Berkman? I do have one. Mr. Berkman, for, again, thinking about a little bit different, obviously, than some of the street construction that we've done, although we'll be building, not too far away. Do residents in that area, trying to think of what other, that's obviously a busy street, just thinking about, the time length of the demolition, I think a lot of just concerns about materials and the age of the building. Is there any communication that goes out to surrounding neighbors about a demolition like this?
We can certainly do that. You're right. Customarily with road projects where people will be inconvenienced with detours or closures, we commonly do that. This is a little bit different than that in that we won't be shutting anything down. There might be a lane restriction or a lane closure to accommodate equipment off to the side of the road. But certainly with the concern about the immediate neighbors, we can work with our community engagement staff and let folks know what to expect. The demolition does have to be completed by April, so we don't know yet when it will start, but sometime soon in the new year.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just think a busy street, some of the concerns that we heard, a little bit further away in this corridor, everything that's happening sort of around the country, even though this is obviously not an active fire, this is a demolition, but taking down a building and just thinking through some of our other sustainability efforts as well. So thank you. Hearing no other comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item number 7 is a resolution approving agreement with MDOT for the Road-and-Mill resurfacing of O'Brien Road from Colville Avenue to 125 feet west of Butterworth Avenue and authorizing $867,002 for the local share of project cost.
So moved. Support.
Moved and supported.
This project will resurface about a half mile of O'Brien between those limits, which is the south side of the Mines Golf Course, to orient yourselves. We were able to obtain a $577,000 surface transportation program grant to help support this work. And that's a federal aid grant that's administered through the state, the Michigan Department of Transportation. So MDOT then bids and administers these projects that have that funding stream. For that to happen, we always bring before you an agreement with MDOT that sets forth the standard terms and conditions and the final financial arrangement by which the project will be funded and performed. This project was based on, or this amounts were based on total estimated project costs of $1,444,540, which when you deduct that surface transportation grant leaves a balance of $867,002, which would be the city's share. So we're seeking your approval of the agreement and authorization of that local share to come from the Vital Streets Fund.
Thank you. Colleagues, questions?
Well, I just want to say thank you because I know there's going to be a lot of construction this season, and so as we are just beginning to think about that, it's great whenever we can partner with MDOT to do things, and no pun intended, but intended, it literally makes it smoother for everyone. This is kind of a more rural-ish area of our community, so it's nice to see it getting some attention, and just to echo what Commissioner Yasazi was saying, that, communication in the neighborhoods is always good in rerouting traffic, since there isn't a lot of different things to get out of that community. So, but thank you for that and the update. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 8 is a resolution approving agreement with MDOT for the resurfacing of Plainfield Avenue from I-96 to Airway Drive and authorizing the local share of the project cost in an amount not to exceed $30,000.
So moved. Support.
This is another project that we're working with MDOT on because Plainfield Avenue is their trunk line, so it's MDOT street. And actually, majority of that segment that was read is outside the city limits. It's up to and into Plainfield Township. But there is a portion that lies within the city limits on the southern end. Public Act 51 requires that local governments share in a percentage of the cost of maintaining state roads within their boundaries, with the percentage depending on population and size of the municipality. So larger cities have a slightly higher share. Again, much of this being in Plainfield Township, there is just a small segment, less than a half mile within the city of Grand Rapids. So that equation works out to be a local share of $30,000, which would come from the Streets Capital Fund. Work is anticipated on this stretch to begin sometime after the Memorial Day holiday and be completed in early November.
Great, thank you, Mr. Berkman. All those in favor?
Support?
Hearing no opposition, motion carries. Thank you. Item number 9 is a resolution awarding a contract with Kaminga and Road Votes. Am I saying that right, Clerk? Road Votes, okay. Inc. for reconstruction of Garfield Avenue from Butterworth Street to Fulton Street in the amount of $1,983,316.25, with a total amount not to exceed $2,631,000.
So moved.
Support?
Moved and supported?
So we will be reconstructing this roughly half-mile stretch of Garfield, including new water main, replacement of water services, 13 of which are lead water services along this stretch. Some storm sewer improvements. We're installing bulb outs at the crosswalks, which narrow the crosswalks, shorten the distance that the pedestrians are in the roadway. New ADA compliant sidewalk ramps, and replacing some deficient sidewalk. The water main along this corridor is over 100 years old in this area and has required several repairs in recent years, so we'll be completely replacing that. Design and construction engineering and inspection are being handled in-house by our engineering department. We received 5 bids, with K&R providing that low bid of $1,983,316, which was under our engineer's estimate of about $2.06 million. So seeking your approval of the award to K&R and the authorization of total expenditures of $2,631,000. That will come from the Vital Streets Fund and the Water System Fund. Since timing wasn't critical on this project, we bid it with the option for the contractor to select either the 2025 or the 2026 construction season to give us hopefully a more competitive advantage in lining up that work. So it hasn't yet been decided, but the initial read is that the contractor will likely do this in 2026. But of course, we'll notify the neighbors and the church and school along that corridor once we know those dates.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Berkman?
I would just like to reiterate and thank you for the work that the Vital Streets Committee and the work that's being done there. Something we always need to be highlighting and elevating in the community, that we are looking very seriously as a city to be addressing the city water supply lines, and that we are doing everything we can to be upgrading those maintenance. It's really no surprise after everything this last decade that we have over 100-year-old supply lines, and that we have real concerns with lead, and we are addressing those things. And it's really great to just be highlighting that once again. This isn't a simple project, but every project has its own complexities, and it's nice to be able to say that. So I just want to highlight that for the moment, that we are continuing to move forward and that we're doing these things. The one thing I was surprised about in reading this is that the road in that one section hadn't been resurfaced or dealt with since 1993. So it's not just our water, it's also the other things. I don't know if you have any comments or something you wanted to add there.
Yeah, so part of our Vital Streets program looks at aligning with our utilities capital improvement plans, because of course we not only want to minimize disruption to a particular corridor by aligning those projects, but we also want to maximize the dollars and the what those can do, so that we're not tearing up a street and then later replacing the water main, or vice versa, because you have to restore the street once you put new water main in. So we work closely with the water department, with the sewer department, with private utilities to align our work and adjust our schedules so that it aligns with theirs and vice versa, so that we can maximize what the dollars we have to invest can accomplish.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item number 10 is a resolution awarding a contract with Severance Electric Co., Inc. for fiber optic connection at 850 Pinnell Street, Grand Rapids. This is the new Grand Rapids Fire Training Facility, 1500 Scribner Avenue, and Kendall Fire Station in the amount of $339,141.70, with a total amount not to exceed $489,500.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Mr. Berkman?
So the city's Energy, Lighting, and Communications, or ELC department, has overhead and underground fiber optic infrastructure throughout city right-of-way. This particular project will provide that fiber optic connection from that infrastructure in the right-of-way into three significant projects that we have underway: the new Public Service Center at Scribner, the new Fire Training Center on Panel, and the Kendall Fire Station. We combine these three into one to maximize scale and seek an overall better bid price. And so Severance provided the low bid in the amount of $339,141.70, just slightly over our engineer's estimate of $330,000. Do like to note that Severance will be utilizing a 4% MLBE participation rate, utilizing Wyoming Excavators and L&O Construction for some concrete work on the project. But ultimately seeking your approval to go ahead and award that contract to Severance, and that total not to exceed amount of $489,500 will come from the Capital Improvement Fund.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Berkman. Any comments, colleagues?
I just want to ask one quick question. Maybe it's because I'm relatively new, but when you say MLBE, we're talking about the micro loan business?
Yeah, micro local business.
Local
enterprise.
business.
Yep.
And this is something that's important because we want to be expanding our subcontractors in the community, but it doesn't necessarily mean minority. It means micro loan. And so if you wanted to explain that for a hot minute, that would be great.
Sure. So the MLBE program is run through our Office of Equity and Engagement, and it looks at the financial side, but also the geographic side. It has to be a contractor within Kent County, so local. And then they also look at the ownership's net worth in terms of being able to apply for and be eligible as a registered MLBE. Once you are, if a general contractor utilizes a MLBE sub, they're eligible for bid discounts. And in the case of that category, you can get up to a 5% discount, up to a maximum of $100,000. And so then we evaluate the bids based on those discounts. They're still awarded the total amount, but when it comes to comparing one bid over another, you look at the discounted bid amount. And so it's an incentive for general contractors to utilize MLBE subs where possible.
Thank you for that.
And Mr. Berkman, and maybe this is a reminder too for Deputy City Attorney or Deputy City Manager, we increased that amount to 9%, or what the discounted rate was. Didn't we do that in our 2022 year?
That was before my time, so
Okay,
I'm going to have to
sorry.
research it.
I'm just thinking we could give some of that background to our new colleagues to just
Sure.
talk about. I think that was actually a change that Commissioner Jones had proposed, and I know like Lou's looking it up right now to remember when it was. But we had a certain percentage, from the discount, and then we were able to bump that up. And City Treasurer is laughing too because he might even remember, because I know that was something that Commissioner Jones worked quite a bit on. So we could get you some of that history as well, because that could show that continued investment and support on the MLBE program. So thank you. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item number 11 is a resolution authorizing assessor to spread nuisance charges for certain outstanding accounts receivable, roll number 8794, totaling $596,408.83. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Mr. City Treasurer.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is a standard item that we bring forward twice a year. And so I really want to recognize our co-compliance department because they've really worked with our community, worked with our residents before we get to this process. This is one of the last steps in terms of a collection process for us because it allows us to start the whole hearing of necessity and step-by-step instructions in our calendar before we can add these outstanding balances to a property tax bill. But really, I think I've come to appreciate the outstanding work that our compliance team does, because they really meet with, talk to, engage with our residents, trying to get to a point where they can resolve an issue in 45, 60, 90 days before it comes to a billing event. And so they really do that. They're the boots on the ground being out there to do this work. And so really, this is just a standard item we have. So this starts the process. We have 2,185 outstanding invoices totaling $596,000. We do give you a detailed breakout of what those charges are. And so really what's going to happen is we will then start the process. We will send a delinquent notice to the customer again, where they have a right to appeal this and go through that process. So they also have a secondary chance to come to the table to review this, to pay it before it becomes an item that we then transfer to the tax bill. So this is a real standard item that we do every 6 months. We do it in the summer and in the winter time, and so this is the start of that process.
Thank you, City Treasurer. Questions for John?
I would just reiterate what you said, and thank you to your staff too, and thank you to the city code compliance staff. It is always challenging when we see people who are not able to make their compliance and then have fees or fines, and considering what kind of burdens those people might be dealing, or if it's just a delinquent landlord or whatever. But I do notice that there are 572 rental certifications, so that's an example where we are actually working with landlords and then being able to get their places certified in the city registry, but then for whatever reason they haven't paid their bill, it sounds like. So, and then, for those listening online, they might be interested in, if they haven't got the packet in front of them, just noting that we had 350 blight monitoring situations and 935 yard complaints and 155 housing violations that are on this unpaid list. So I just want to really highlight that and appreciate everything that you and the city code folks are doing as well. Assessment is not an easy thing to deal with, so it's nice to see that we give an extra second chance.
Always. Thank you, Commissioner.
Chair?
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Good morning. Happy 2025. Of the charges, of the nuisance charges listed here, do you have a sense, or can you share more about how many of them are proactive in nature, kind of part of our processes? So I'm thinking maybe the certification process might rely more on that versus more responsive and reliant on citizen complaints. And this process in response to an individual citizen's complaint, an example of kind of the yard and refuse violation. So can you talk a little bit more about the differences of the types of nuisance charges and how they're initiated?
With those, I'd have to really dig into it, because really I don't know how many are triggered by a complaint from a neighbor. If I'm calling on my neighbor that has, 16-inch weeds in the yard, that's going to trigger at least the first notice, a 45-day notice that please take care of this, mow your yard, or we'll come do it for you. So I'd really have to dig deeper into each one of those types of complaints as to why whether it's generated specifically by a complaint or whether it's generated by us traveling in the neighborhoods or what we're seeing.
Right. So I think separate from these over 2,000 charges, speaking more generally, Chair, I think kind of an overview of how these are initiated will be really helpful, I think, for me and certainly for members of the community. Some of the items on this list, particularly around blight, are huge concerns of mine and a lot of the constituents and community groups that I talk to throughout the city and certainly within the third ward. So I think a public presentation kind of describing those processes might be helpful. And I see, and I've heard past commissioners kind of speak to some concerns around fairness in some of those processes, right? If you have that neighbor that's always calling and always getting you fined for having, your grass 1 inch over after a big rain versus those neighbors who are not kind of doing that. And so I'm just curious to learn more about the trigger points and then kind of what we're doing to handle them, particularly when there's kind of some of that fairness that's not baked in.
Sure. And Commissioner, I can definitely get with Ms. Connie Bohach and have that conversation. And I believe they probably put together a presentation for you each year as well, that maybe that can be a segment of the presentation as to how these different charges come about.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, City Treasurer. I was just going to say, yep, that sounds like Ms. Bohach. And then also, They also work with different neighborhood associations as well on some of these pieces. So I think there's probably a variety of arenas. And then I think it would even be good to see, kind of when you do that, how many are resolved in that 40. So, because I think we're looking at this end result, right, where we're going to, before we go to the collections, versus how many in that 45-day period are resolved in that. And so we can see that, to your point, Commissioner, we're getting a broader view than versus sort of who's at the end of this, so we can understand the process overall. So I'll add that comment as well.
I think where you're going to see that confirmation really is on May 20th when we confirm the roll.
Yeah.
So you're going to see how many of these from the 2195, what did it get down to?
Yeah.
Were they able to come forward with a notice and make payment? Were they able to appeal and be successful? And then really, in our look at our work, we usually see about $400,000 at the end going on to the tax roll. So we can see what has transpired over the course of the next 3 or 4 months.
And I do think it's worth noting that these are the ones that haven't been paid. So to Commissioner Yasasi, I think that this is a larger, did I say it wrong? Yasasi, sorry. To make sure that, I think city code compliance and Ms. Bohatch's presentation or a larger committee conversation would be helpful, because there are more cases than what we're seeing here. This is just what hasn't been paid.
Correct.
So thank you.
And then, thank you. And then Ms. Bohatch could also underlie, I think it was maybe last year, the year before, Ms. Behrens, we did receive some money from the state to work specifically on blighted properties. So we did accept a grant. I think that was last year, the year before. So we can continue to look at what are those funding sources as it relates to, sort of like what the city would like to resolve, but how do we offer, support? I think that was your comment as well, Commissioner Perdue. So thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right. So this is a resolution. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our last resolution is one approving a construction agreement amendment for Ironwood Manufacturing. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Support. Moved and supported. Mr. Bergman?
Yes, so we will often bring construction agreements to this committee that facilitates private development that will be impacting our right-of-way when it's in the city, or our utilities. And in this case, this project is located in Talmadge Township, where we do have sewer and water. This agreement was originally approved back in 2023 for a light industrial development in Talmadge Township. They were doing a public water main extension, and there was a sanitary sewer lateral connection as part of that project. That project did not happen, and the property has since been sold to a new developer, B&B Ironwood LLC. So this resolution provides for an amendment to that original construction agreement, naming that new developer.
Great. Thank you. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, colleagues, that concludes our Community Development Committee meeting at 9:48.
my first meeting. So this is a little more exciting for three of us than it is for four of us, but great to be here and excited to get to work on city business. So we do not have an exhaustive agenda today, but we have two items. The first is, where is my list? The first is, oh, it's right in front of me. Okay, I can read a computer. So the first is resolution scheduling a special meeting of the City Commission on Thursday, January 23. And I'm going to hand this over to the city manager so he can discuss, but just so you all know what I didn't remember this morning, this is a proposal for a morning meeting. So this would be 8 until 11. Am I correct, city manager? Okay, great. So.
You need a motion.
Support.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, and Happy New Year to you, Mayor and Commissioners, and to all the staff and public. Looking forward to having a great 2025. This meeting starts us in that direction. What I'm hoping we'll get an opportunity to do is to have a conversation among the dais without actually voting on anything, actually just dialoguing and strategizing and getting to know each other, and also a little professional development that day, if you will, talking about effective governance and administration and some of the good practices related to planning, communicating, and reporting, and then get into the business of the city in terms of our future plans, both talking about the balance of the work plan for fiscal 25, because this is, for three of you, this is the first day, but this is really halftime in our fiscal year, and so we already have an approved budget, approved plans that we all have in place and want to give you what the third quarter and the fourth quarter looks like. No pun intended for Michigan and Michigan State fans having to watch Ohio State. So we'll talk about what the second half of this season looks like. And then lastly, we'll revisit the focus areas for fiscal 26 as we begin to we had a work session last November with the City Commission and discussed some focus areas and priorities. I want to revisit those to make sure that we're all aligned as we begin planning the fiscal year 26 budget and hear your thoughts and feedbacks as we prioritize. I will be asking a very interesting question of really lasering in terms of all the focus areas, what are really some of the high priorities we see as this governing body sees moving forward of the current focus areas. So should be about 3 hours. We'd love to have this happen all day, but we'll have other opportunities to visit again, probably in February. We'll do a mid-year update more formally. So that's the intent.
Great. So we have motion and we have support. Sorry. We have motion, we have support. Sorry, I'm going to ask my clerk here. Do we have to have a record roll call vote on things, or can we just do voice vote? Okay, so voice vote, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion's carried. Okay, on to item number 2. This is a resolution to amend the City Commission policy entitled Use of Public Funds by Elected Officials for Travel and Other Expenses to authorize, as drafted, a $700 per month vehicle allowance for the mayor in lieu of a city-owned vehicle. So a little bit of context here. This is, I'm sorry, motion on this?
So moved.
Support.
A little bit of context on this. I think in 1970-something, there was a 75. There was a part of the compensation for the mayor that was put in place was to allow them and I think the language is something like a mid-cost or mid-size or something, a mid-something vehicle for pretty broad use. And obviously, there's some advantages to that. There's also some advantages to simply letting the mayor do the same thing by another means. And so the idea here would be to, at least this is a request that I made to ask the city staff to essentially identify the cost of that vehicle historically and set a stipend alternative below the experienced cost of the car itself. So this is obviously something that I have So if I can take a moment here and just articulate for the record, if someone has a conflict, that means they have a direct interest in the matter. I think you could argue maybe that I don't have a conflict of interest here because this is choosing something from column A or something from column B, which are essentially equivalent. I already get to choose something from column A. If this didn't pass, I would get to get use of a city vehicle. That being said, there are also what one might call the appearance of conflict or appearance of impropriety. Judges live by this rule. So in other words, if it doesn't look good for you to be involved in voting or discussing something that looks like it's for you, you should probably, when in doubt, pull back from it. So I am going to recuse myself from voting on this. I'm also going to recuse myself from discussion. So even if, so there are sort of three levels of ways you can get out of a conflict of interest. One is to say have a conflict, in which case you don't talk about it, you don't discuss it, you don't lobby on it, you don't twist your fellow commissioners' arms, you don't do any of that stuff, and you don't vote. The other option would be to say, I'm going to be part of the discussion, but I'm not going to vote. And the other option would be to disclose and say, I do want to discuss and I do want to vote, but I still want people to know. So, for example, if we were doing something about city code for residential rental properties, I own one. I own a 3-unit apartment on Prospect Street. So if we were discussing that, I might say, well, I don't think I have a conflict here, but I want the city to know that this will, in fact, affect my rental properties. Wouldn't affect me any more than anybody else with a rental property, but still, I want citizens to know. So this is something that I'm going to recuse myself from discussion of and recuse myself from voting on. And so at this point, I'd actually like to ask the president of our commission to take over the podium, and I will walk out of the room.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'll turn to my colleagues, see if there's any questions, comments, or discussion on this item.
I do.
Yeah, Commissioner.
And do we call you Commissioner Robbins or President Robbins?
I don't know, whatever you want.
Commissioner Robbins, I'd actually like to offer an amendment on this item,
Okay.
if possible. My amendment is to, I'd like to offer an amendment for the stipend to be set at 10% less than the evaluated cost of providing a car, so that we're saving some money here.
Okay, I will turn to my colleagues and hear other thoughts. Yes, Commissioner?
I think we need to leave it as it is. I believe, and City Attorney, maybe you can speak to this, that the mayor was allowed a lease of a vehicle and not a stipend.
That's correct.
Okay, and so since we already have city vehicles, I just said this earlier to somebody, I'm a coupon chick, so I'm going to save some money. And we got to think about, this is public dollars that we're using to pay for a vehicle for someone else, and you already have a vehicle, but we have city vehicles sitting downstairs that can be used for city purposes. So I'm not in agreement with this at all. I think we need to stick with what is in the law or the ordinance or whatever we're saying that we're doing here, and not go back to 1970, 1950, or 1930. We are in the 2000s now, and this is what's on the books. If we say that they are entitled to a lease, then they're entitled to a lease. But why would we purchase a vehicle or pay for a vehicle that belongs to another person when we have vehicles that can be used right here at the city?
Okay, so your proposition or your mind is to remove this item from the agenda and keep the current arrangement as is. Yeah. Okay.
Since my amendment was offered first, are we allowed to see if there was any support for that amendment?
Yeah, let me turn to City Attorney.
So we should address them one at a time.
Okay.
There's an original motion on the floor, so we have to deal with that. Then you made a motion, you need to get some amendment.
We take that first.
Okay, is there support for that amendment?
I just feel like we need more discussion before we decide on an amendment at this time. So, Commissioner.
Yeah, so Commissioner Kilgore made an amendment.
Okay.
He's looking for support, because you can't have a discussion unless there's support of his amendment.
Okay.
Okay, is there support for the amendment from
Support.
Commissioner Kilgore? Okay, discussion on this amendment.
Yeah, so in saving money, I'm looking at this as this is 10% of the evaluated cost. So this is always going to have us saving money and being fiscally responsible. We also have this same sort of policy with our phones. So I see no difference with what we get for phones. So I have a city phone. You can also be reimbursed for city phones. So this is the same type of operation as we have for technology, and bringing it to cars just allows for folks to have that same option for their transportation. We also may have it where it's significantly cheaper for the taxpayer, depending on which mayor, what vehicle they choose. So this actually allows us to be a few steps back if possible.
Okay.
Can you clarify, if that's okay, Chair? Can you clarify that you're asking for 10% of the, explain.
Evaluated cost. So the city evaluates the cost of how much it is for the mayor to have a vehicle from the city, and however much that cost is, we will always be 10% behind that if the mayor then chooses to have their own vehicle.
Just to be clear, that's different than the proposed flat rate of $700 a month.
Yes.
Which may or may not change. Whereas your 10% would change based on the evaluation.
Yes, because cars, and this is also smarter because car leases may look different, right? From year to year. It might be different to lease a car in 2026. So this is also making sure that we're keeping on trend with the market, with having a percentage rather than a fixed price.
Okay, I'm going to turn to my city manager real quick here.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So to Commissioner Belshak's question, so you're not asking for a 10% reduction of the $700 that we're proposing for a $610 lease amount. Is that what you're asking?
No, 10% of the evaluated, evaluated cost
right,
is.
Just to be clear, this obviously is the first time we've done this, and to use the evaluated cost of a lease, we benchmarked local dealership at about $499 a month, plus the other associated costs of would-be insurance and maintenance, and we came up to about $770. So this amount is about 10% less than our benchmark cost of what a private lease would cost. So that is this number currently. So if you want further reduction, it would have to be lower than what this number is. But this number is already roughly 10% lower than what we benchmarked.
Okay, thanks for the context. Commissioner Isasi, did you have something to add?
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I'm not in a position to thank you. I'm not in a. I won't be supporting this amendment. I will be looking forward to go back to the original resolution.
Okay. So, City Clerk, we need a vote on this particular amendment. Okay. Okay. All in favor of Commissioner Kilgore's amendment, say aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
The motion does not carry. So now we'll turn to Commissioner Knight's. Did I hear a motion or an amendment for? Yes, go ahead.
I think, sorry, Commissioner, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you gave your thoughts on the original resolution. So I'd like to give my thoughts on the original resolution as the amendment was just voted down. I appreciate the overview, and I appreciate, thank you to Mayor LeGrand for sharing that perspective of what is, certainly a true conflict of interest and a perceived. I think I appreciate that. I know he has been very supportive of financial disclosures, particularly in his work at the state level. So no surprise that he has recused himself. I would have the same concerns as Commissioner Knight. When I see the things flexibility, cost saving, and responsibility, those all make sense. But I think as a cost savings, the city as a whole, typically our purchasing power is what allows us to have cost savings as well, because we have a full faith of a large organization, just like other large organizations in the community can negotiate on those sorts of pieces. I think my greater concern is that while, certainly I don't know what the vehicle will be, and I'm not, and not going to say that would cover what the vehicle is. However, with with a lease or utilization of city-owned vehicles, perhaps, some of us have had to go to Detroit or Lansing and you take out a vehicle, it doesn't result in an asset that I then acquire as an individual, as an elected official. And so I think that's my primary concern in this, is that essentially either it's an asset that, and again, we should be, I think when we do policy, we should be looking at it from the policy perspective, not exactly what transpired in the conversation with Mayor LeGrand. And I think, and I hope that he would have that same perspective as we build policy for the future. Obviously we're looking at it today, but not to take into account the circumstances of this. But I think from an oversight perspective, that would be my biggest concern, is that, a stipend would go to an asset that that individual, the mayor in this case, would then retain, and would be able to resell it or reuse it. And so that's of my concern.
Okay.
And so that is why I will not be supporting this resolution.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any other thoughts or questions on this? Yes, Commissioner.
Thanks. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. I'm curious just kind of on the history bit. I think the mayor mentioned that this policy was initially created in the 70s, did I hear him say? But my question really is more so when I think about the personal resources that the mayor and each commissioner expends to meet with constituents, to travel. Just want to understand a little bit more about the thinking of an allowance in this way for the mayor, and any equivalencies or lack thereof for commissioners who are also kind of traveling quite a bit to serve and to connect with constituents and key stakeholders. So is there any additional information, city manager or city attorney or others, to provide on some of that background and some of that initial thinking and how that might relate to today?
Yeah. So thank you, Commissioner Perdue. So the policy is a longstanding policy for travel for elected officials and other expenses. And the policy clearly identifies how authorization is approved for travel, that commissioners need the public vote of this body to approve. It talks about how expenses are reimbursed for travel and other transportation expenses. So there are other provisions already in the policy for conferences and travel. The only provision for a use of a car for both business, and this is the difference, the current policy permits use for business and personal use for the mayor. So that is how this began, and I don't want to speak for Mayor LeGrand, but his personal use preference was not to have an assigned medium price automobile from the city, but to have his own choice of vehicle by use of allowance. And I think that happened as he understood what the benefits were. So this is not, clearly if there were other policies that we were crafting for the entire dais, several things. One, you have a local office compensation commission that we would want to make sure that that body didn't need to improve any pay increases for the commission. And secondly, we'd go through a very deliberate budget process to make sure we're budgeting for this. So this was a request of the mayor that he's asked his colleagues to consider, and that's how we were led to this deliberation. We are not recommending any other aspects of amendment of this policy at this time.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I've utilized, I think we all have kind of the business use, and the policy does outline an allowance for personal use for the mayor. The choice of option A and B, I think, does align with a lot of companies and businesses, how they approach and give options to folks who get allowances, whether it's a phone or a vehicle or something else. And given that the policy already allows personal use, I think that this approach and kind of these options are fair, even though I do share some of the thinking and concerns around the assets and the future ownership for the use of kind of per the policy, per the historical context, and what we've already agreed, or this body in a time in history has agreed that the mayor can have access to a vehicle for personal use. I'm in support of this resolution. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Yep.
And I just want to be clear that we're looking at this as a policy change that would be official, like permanent, not just related to Mayor LeGrand, correct? Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you. And I appreciate commissioners' comments here tonight, I think, or today. This has been very helpful. And for the public interest and record, this was not pre-decided ahead of time. This is an actual conversation happening, and I'm still trying to make my mind up right now. So thank you for the conversation.
Yes, thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments on this one? So, City Attorney, I believe on the table we have a motion to remove this item or to approve it. Okay.
The amendment failed.
Okay. Okay. So the motion on the table is to approve this item as is. I will call the question. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion carries.
It was clear to me.
Okay.
I heard two.
Good.
2 nays, yeah.
Okay, we can have Mayor come back in
Yep,
now.
okay.
Because I want to explain what happens now because of consent.
Okay.
Can I ask for clarity? Does that imply, Commissioner Roberts, that you were a yea vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
So the motion passed, but since it did not pass unanimously, it will be removed from consent and will be voted on again this evening. So it'll be on items removed from consent. So you'll probably have to do the same recusal again for that. But then we have the time, because the reason we take it off consent, even though the public can speak on it, but the public can speak on things that are on consent as well. So that's part of the standing rule. So just for our new members to understand how things come off consent. That's one of them.
Okay, moving on, we are now going to have an update. Those of you who are, I'm sorry. Okay. Right now? Oh, okay. I've been informed by our city attorney that we have a need for a closed session after the next two presentations, and the reason for the closed session is because of a pending litigation matter and the need to discuss a legal opinion. So I'd like a motion for us to be able to move into closed session after the next two presentations.
So moved.
Support? All in favor?
Aye.
Nope, sorry.
You need to do a roll call.
Sorry, got to do a roll call on open meeting before I get about closed session. Sorry. So roll call vote. Commissioner Kilgore?
Yes.
Commissioner Knight?
Yes.
Commissioner Robbins?
Yes.
Commissioner Usasi?
Yes.
Commissioner Perdue?
Yes.
And Commissioner Belcheck?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you. So moving right along to we're going to get a presentation now on update on land bank startup activities. To tee this up, just so that everyone remembers, there was legislation that finally passed last year, I believe, that empowered cities that do not, that are residing in counties that don't have land banks, that have populations over 50,000, and we qualify, to initiate movement to create their own land banks. And that the city took action on that, and we have now formed one, as everyone on the podium is aware. So we have some initial enabling documents for that authority, and let's talk about it.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. Sarah Renero, Economic Development Director for the city. Thank you, Mayor, for hitting some of the points here. I have a handful of slides. Just wanted to give a foundation level background on what land banks are, how we got here, and then just give you a slide on our timeline since October, which is where we really introduced the run of creating a citywide land bank. So, thank you. Jeez. Thank you. I'm going to try not to have a coughing attack. Okay, so Michigan was one of 17 states that has enabling legislation granting us unique statutory powers to create land banks. There are over 250 across the country between state, county, regional, and municipal land banks.
As the mayor indicated, the Land Bank Fast Track Authority was amended in '23. It went into effect in February of last year and really set in motion communities like Grand Rapids the ability to create a land bank because of our population size being greater than 50,000, and also because we are located in a county that does not have a land bank at the county level. The Kent County Land Bank dissolved effective in '19, and at that time set in motion a few different things at the city to really address a housing conversation. And so we saw out of that, we saw the collaborative housing needs assessment. We also saw the Affordable Housing Fund be established, and now we're primed to actually create the land bank and get running here because of all we know, all the needs we know around housing. So again, for just broader awareness, land banks are public authorities that are created to acquire, hold, manage, facilitate real estate and the redevelopment of property in order to put these properties back into productive use, meet community goals, increase housing, and help stabilize property values. Powers available but not limited to here are issuing bonds, borrowing money, investing funds, accepting grants, loans, other aid, holding title, clearing title, entering contracts for goods and services, manage, collect, and sell real property. Oftentimes you see it established, land banks established for new and affordable housing opportunities, and we see, different economic tools like our Brownfield Tax Increment Redevelopment Financing Act paired with land bank activation, which ultimately increases, again, our real property tax values. For the city's focus, I think that we are all in agreement that we want to work in concert with the master plan, the city's strategic plan, as well as our equitable economic development and mobility strategy to activate property. This function since the dissolve countywide land bank has been residing in the Economic Development Office. So I want to give a shout out to Jessica Solis, who's been managing the portfolio alongside the State Land Bank since that time. And because of the creation at the city level, those properties at the state are working their way over to be transferred to the city. We see a lot of synergies with the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, which is ultimately named as the board to serve initially for the land bank. Within the Land Bank Act and the Brownfield Act, there's just a lot of synergies within the real estate world there. And so we thought that pairing made sense. The timeline for actions to date, we initially presented at this meeting back in September. Also did a presentation to our Economic Development Project team in October, and ultimately there was a city resolution on October 8th that established an interlocal governmental agreement with the State Land Bank Authority, which identified the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority as the initial Land Bank Authority board. That also allowed for commission to rescind the appointment and revert to a 5-member board appointed by the mayor and approved by commission. We've held 3 subcommittees with our land bank, a handful of the board, just to get things activated, and we started those back in October. We also did an educational review for our Brownfield Redevelopment Authority board in October, and saw the first meeting in December for the Land Bank Authority, where they adopted bylaws and appointed the Economic Development Director as me as the Executive Director for the Land Bank Authority. We had a bid close last week for a maintenance contract, and we had a couple of interested parties to help maintain that portfolio, which we anticipate to be 106 properties transferring on the 1st of February. So these are kind of next steps. We've got a second land bank meeting next week, which is requiring in our first meeting of the new year to elect officers. We also anticipate resolutions to support legal services and maintenance services, which have equated to about $65,000 annually from our work with the State Land Bank. And then we also anticipate coming back to commission in a couple of weeks to actually terminate the agreement with the State Land Bank and transfer and allow that transfer of the properties from the land bank to the city, which again will be happening on the 1st of February. For the first quarter, we anticipate a lot of activity within the land bank, and I'm excited about the interest here today. We've been working with our planning department to identify the 106 properties and what's buildable and what's not, and so appreciate the support there. We also have varying things in motion around real estate entrepreneurs or emerging developers, and anticipate working closely to build out more programming to get more faces in our pipeline of activating property. We'll continue to market property for residential development, and then also work around the Affordable Housing Fund Board and identify alignment opportunities there. That is what I have for you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mayor, before you go, so the reason this item is being teed up in part is to do a review of the governance of the land bank and inform you that we are about, as Ms. Renell has said, about to be in receivership of several properties that they have been managing for us, and we expect that at the beginning of the month. The other part is a forward look in terms of the future of governance. As she said in the briefing, this body last year authorized the Brownfield Authority, the members thereof, to be appointed as Land Bank Authority members. That's a 7-member body. Commissioner Asasi was part of that body at that time. And now one of the provisions in the resolution at some point would allow the City Commission, upon approval, to rescind that governance structure and allow another structure to be created by mayoral appointment, if approved by the City Commission. And so that's part of the conversation. The other part is if and I'll defer to the mayor to have him share his thoughts and vision around the intent or the improvement that could potentially come from that. The other part is just practically in terms of change management. And we can talk a little bit more about that in budgeting for any change. Right now, the executive director for that body is a city staff person. So I'll let the mayor articulate more of what he would like this commission to consider moving forward.
Thank you, City Manager. So I don't know what the will of the commission is here, if anyone wants to ask any questions now or say anything now. This is something that I think we've all thought about, and I know we've had some very broad discussions about. Does anybody want to make any comment at this point? Commissioner Belcheck.
Maybe I missed it, but how many properties are you expecting to be in receivership?
106.
Okay, I did hear that number.
But not all buildable.
Yeah, right, exactly. And in terms of participation from the community in the land bank, what kinds of community engagement and or committee availability, subcommittee availability are you imagining?
Yeah, I think we're still mapping all that out. Nothing's been identified to date. So it's really, we can make it what we want.
Anyone else have any questions or comments right now? I'm sorry. Yeah, Commissioner Usasi.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for this presentation, Ms. Ranero, and thank you for the comments. City Manager, I think that, yes, first, for our new colleagues, there was a lot of work that was done beforehand because we had a time clock, right? So I think right now, what you'll see, this authority that is under, is essentially 3 authorities that are meeting, is a lot of the setting up of the process, making sure that we're going to be able to take that work and have the legal aspects and all these other pieces. So a lot of that is sort of set in stone. And I know Mayor LeGrand, you and I have had a chance to talk about how this could be, how this could be more transformational for this community, that we, everybody on this body, everybody in the audience, we are looking for every single tool that we can utilize to make housing more affordable, to make development more accessible for people who want to be part of that process. And so I think we have, I think what I described to you as both the short-term and the long-term plan. So one, I want to say thank you to those that have been very involved in this work, but I think that at that Brownfield Authority, Land Bank Authority, we have had very much conversations that we know that things may change, that we're aware that there might be different processes or how to create a more dynamic opportunity for this work. Previous to all of this, we also discuss just the realities of our economic development department. They have taken on a lot, record years of development in this city, and we also know that economic development seems to be a bipartisan issue, and so probably from both particularly from a state perspective, there'll probably continue to be programs that'll need to be managed or supported through our economic development department. So while I don't want to speak for the whole body, I think there is a reality that short-term and long-term plans. Let's get this thing set up. Let's make the legal aspects happen. But to Commissioner Belczak's standpoint, how do we encourage more voices of those who have lived experiences, which was certainly part of the process that we had for our Affordable Housing Fund Board. It was a very deliberate process that's a much larger board. And I've even, shared with Mayor LeGrand that I'm most likely going to be stepping back from the Brownfield Authority just to allow different voices to be able to continue to serve. And I think that's, an opportunity that I wanted to highlight. So what I think would be helpful as we go into that budgetary process is understand how do we create that more dynamic or proactive work that the land bank can do. What would that budget look like for us? So then we can all be prepared as we go into that budgeting season. In the past, and I wasn't here when Dave Allen was the county land bank authority, but what did that look like in terms of staff? I think there's legal realities that are certainly going to be very costly for us. So building out a budget, I think, would be helpful of what is, again, that longer term plan. There's always things to do in economic development department, but I do want to say thank you particularly to Mr. Doug Booth, who has done a lot of this work to get this off the ground and has gone to a lot of those sessions. I think this also speaks to, I know we're going to be having this in our next meeting on the 22nd, but as we think about our legislative agenda and we think about what we're going to be at, what we are going to be going to our state legislators to say, this is what we need help and support on, and how could they create some more enabling legislation. So I think I want to recognize work that has been done. I want to think about things in the short term of what we need to set up, and I'm very open to thinking about what does that separate body look like. I would ask the mayor to consider having some commissioner appointments, not being all mayoral appointments, so I'll put that on the record for today as well. But I also know that, Mayor, you're interested in a more nimble body that could perhaps meet on a more regular basis, or just be able to jump into things. So I see the vision. I also think operationally, how do we not forgo what has been done and give a little bit of time, and also communicate this very clearly to the current authority so that they can go into, what are the things that we've been needing to think about, but the language that has been spelled out so far has allowed for that. I know we got into a discussion at our 2 meetings ago about, why does it leave it so open that it could be somebody outside of, say, Ms. Renero's position? It's to consider all these things that might be in front of us and to enable this body of work. It has been a while since we've gotten an update on the Affordable Housing Board, so I am very open to understanding. I think we had some ideas of how we wanted that first round to go, and then there were some realities. Ms. Behrens is shaking her head, just what was shovel ready and what were we able to do with the ARPA dollars that had certain stipulations. But I'm very interested to how do we create that. The county has a revolving board. We have, again, not my organization, but CDFIs who are working in this revolving housing authority work. How do we essentially, one of the goals was always to go out into the public marketplace and to seek out dollars for that affordable housing fund to be able to work to enable some of this work that we want with the land bank as one of the tools. So that was a lot, but I feel like I had some of that perspective of helping set it up. And, city manager always say, what are you thinking? So that's what I'm thinking. Supportive, but would like to understand process and budget moving forward. Thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Robbins.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think my mind is very much in a similar place. I remember when supporting this to create the land bank itself, I think one of my biggest concerns was just that it would, become extra tape to processes and things like that. And so my biggest goal is just, continuing to hope that the organization in this body can move nimbly to work with private emerging developers to get housing out in the market for people to move into. And so, and I know we were pretty prepared from our previous conversations in understanding that the board makeup might look different moving forward. And so I'm also supportive of considering or finding an alternative board makeup for that as well. I think the only other caveat is just a balance of having this body move nimbly, but then with whatever we decide to change, just making sure that it does make sense from a change management process, just given how complex this is. So I think it's, as long as we can strike that balance of moving as quick as we can to get this up and running and making use of it, mixed with just doing it in a measured way, I think I'm excited for it. So.
Any other? Okay. I think we're going to get everybody here. So Commissioner Perdue.
Thank you. On the conversation around committee membership and creating a separate body, I really appreciate the forward thinking around nimbleness and making sure that we're setting this up from a process and staffing and membership standpoint to truly reach the vision that we've all had for this for the last few years. And so as we prepare for that conversation, I'm supportive of that approach and also thoughtful and in agreement with Commissioner Yasasi around appointments and how might we share those. I was past chair of the Committee on Appointments. I think my colleague in Third Ward is the current chair. And so we learned a lot of lessons from our experience working there on appointments to different commissions and making sure that they have clear expectations, everybody being very clear how it works and how it fits into the city. Is it advisory? Is it semi-judicial? So on and so forth. And making sure that folks who are appointed are very clear on time commitment, as well as we're clear and they're clear on what type of expertise we're really looking for. And so those are the things that I want to make sure we're extremely focused in on too as we have this broader conversation about process in order to kind of set a really strong foundation. So thank you for that conversation. The other thing I'll add, just kind of shifting gears, is really a question for the current members. So Commissioner Yasasi and maybe Economic Development Director. I'm just curious if the committee has already talked about how they will prioritize buyers for properties that come into the ownership of the land bank. I really like what you all are working on over this quarter. I'm really excited about that. That will make a ton of progress. But wondering if you've had that conversation or codified anything on how you will prioritize buyers, because I think that is a huge part of the equation that should be clarified early on.
Yeah, I don't know what Commissioner Yasasi would offer.
Your mic. You turn your mic on.
Rookie move. I can hear you now.
Yeah. No, we've had very limited conversations in that regard.
Okay.
Is the quick answer.
Might we consider adding that to the first or second quarter's agenda?
Sure. Mayor, if I could, to Commissioner Perdue's point, I know we've prioritized acquisition and disposition of city-owned property, and that we have a housing first perspective. Nonprofit developers get an opportunity for the first 6 months.
The three tiers.
The three tiers. And while this is separate authority, it may be a good policy to benchmark from nonprofit private developers into individual consumers.
Let's clarify that. Thank you.
Mayor, may I add from the conversation, while we haven't talked about that specifically, we did talk about how we needed to connect particularly with our corridor improvement authorities, as well as connecting into other parts of economic development as like one of them, our emerging developer grants. So how do we make sure that we're not just, I shouldn't say touching, but how are we not just talking to one person about emerging developer over here, but then not having a conversation about what are all the other tools that potentially they could access from economic development. So not really, again, I think this is getting the nuts and bolts, the legal aspects, what can we do, what are things that, are essentially setting up those legal perspectives. But I was going to say the same thing, city manager, I think that's a good disposition process because it exists, and then continuing to utilize. So even just thinking if the work does shift, there will still be definitely that communication that will come from economic development because they're probably going to be the ones, maybe connecting with somebody on a brownfield or connecting with somebody on emerging developer grant. Thanks.
Any other initial comments? So, at the risk of being too excited about something, I think you all know, and I think a number of people know, I am really excited about this as an opportunity for us. Events may prove that I'm overexcited, but I think that there's a real possibility that if we have a land bank and we put the time and the energy into structuring it right, letting it be nimble, having it focused on a citywide agenda of really getting housing in our community and development in some of those neighborhood corridors, I think we have the ability to maybe have this be, if not the biggest, certainly a really big piece in moving us towards the goal that I know we all share, which is getting more housing in Grand Rapids and more affordable housing. I think we all know the need that's out there. And so I often say this is a nice problem to have. People want to move to Grand Rapids. They want to be here. They want to live here. But benchmarking how we can actually get housing and affordable housing in the community, it's going to be a real conversation for us. I mean, we all know that if there really is a need for 15,000 units in this town in the next couple of years, we're not developing at nearly that scale yet. And it's going to, I often say, complex problems need complex solutions. There's not going to be one thing we're going to have to do if we're going to keep our eyes on the prize, but we're going to have to do 20 things maybe. Of them, this looks like a really, really big opportunity to me, and I think to many of us. So I do think, this board was created partly because we wanted to make sure that we could create it, the Land Bank Authority, and because, if the county had woken up on a Tuesday morning and decided to make a land bank, we would have been forestalled in this opportunity. And so it was good to create it right away. And thank you to those who are up in this dais who were here last commission session and did that work. So I'm glad that it exists. It's great. I think we all, as a board now, have an opportunity to ask ourselves, how can we scale this up to the need, and how can we make a board that's really going to function well without, as Commissioner Isasi pointed out, overtaxing our city staff, and also making sure that we have a board that aligns specifically on this goal. So, for example, right now, the Brownfield Authority Board does Brownfield Authority work, has been doing that. That's an area of expertise. But I think if we're going to build this, it's incumbent on us as a board to try to build it right and to figure out how we're going to make a board that can do this work and be empowered. There are some interesting possibilities here that there aren't for a Brownfield Authority, for example. And one of those that was listed was the ability to get donations from the private sector. So this is a board that can actually literally take contributions and might be able to turn those into opportunities out in our community. And the ability to do that, there are a number of reasons to be excited about this opportunity, but that's just one of them. But a board that can be focused on harnessing some of the philanthropic energy in our community. We're not the only people in the community who are worried about affordable housing. A lot of people in this town are worried about it, and a lot of people want to help. And I'm convinced that we can tap into some of that, collective community energy to do good work. I think that it's absolutely true that we don't, the path isn't clear right yet on how we're going to get funding sources for this and how it's going to budget, and all those things will sort of have to be, conversations. I do think that there are examples we can look to, and I've had conversations with folks from Ingham County and from Genesee, and well-functioning land banks often wind up being self-sustaining without too much effort, because there are a couple funding mechanisms there are tax funding mechanisms that allow when a property goes back out into the private sector. There's a tax capture mechanism that goes back to the brownfield that allows the brownfield to get funded by getting properties back into circulation. It's also true that we can simply, one of the conversations that you all experienced and I didn't experience except as a bystander was around the Three Towers development downtown, and there was conversation about, how do we have community benefit from that? Well, if the land bank is a player in how things get developed, and the land bank can be a part of that process, the benefit the community is going to get from land bank involvement in projects and development is we're going to be able to use profits from place A over in place B. And right now, we don't really have a mechanism to do that. So we have the Downtown Development Authority, and they they work inside their own bounds. And so the opportunity to have a citywide, and we all know that there's a real deep hunger in our community to invest in some of our neighborhoods which aren't downtown, and the ability to coordinate with quarter improvement districts and to get I don't want to say mom and pop, but smaller scale development. I think one of the things that I think a lot of us share concern about is that we don't just have big development projects in town, but that we have opportunities for smaller investors to build duplexes, build quads, bring properties back into service that aren't in service now. So I think we've got the ability maybe to have our cake and eat it too. I think if we do this right and it does its work right, we're going to have the ability to free up some opportunities for small-scale development. We're going to be able to benefit from some large-scale investments in ways that the money then can flow back into the community and really be a benefit for the community. So I think that I'm really excited about this. And but if we can do this with excellence, I think I think that we should be having a conversation about moving towards a board that just is focused on this issue, and a board that's fairly nimble, because things move fast in the private sector, and one of the problems government often has is government moves slower than the private sector. And there are reasons for that. We want to make sure that things are reliable for our citizens. And, I always say, look, if my bakery went out of business tomorrow, the city would keep moving. We don't want to wake up tomorrow morning and find out we don't have snowplows, right? There are reasons that the government is more conservative. But at the same time, I think this is an area where we can hope to build an entity which can be nimble, which can respond quickly, that can look for opportunities and grab them, but do so with a laser focus on a charter purpose of actually creating more affordable housing and more opportunity in our community. So I think there's a great opportunity here, and thank you, City Manager, for teeing this up for discussion. This is just a first conversation, right? And I think that as we move together as a board, one of the things that I'm going to keep emphasizing again and again and again is that we have to have deep conversations so that we can move all together. If there's something if something's the right thing to do, we should all be working together and pulling in the same direction. And I also want to say it's fun to hear my first discussion up here, because there's a lot of expertise up here and a lot of thoughtful comments, and I appreciate everyone's thoughts on this. It's always true that 7 people are smarter than 1, but it's also true that 200,000 people are probably smarter than the 7 of us. So I hope this stimulates some community conversation, and I do appreciate. I think it was Commissioner Usasi who pointed out the importance of involving the city and these city citizens in these conversations, and I think that a board that understands the need to listen to the community will also be important as we choose this board. That it doesn't see itself as the CEOs of property acquisition in the city, but see themselves as a conduit for the needs and the thoughts of the community. And that's something I know we all take seriously, but I think that ultimately a board here that's very responsive to the community and listens to the community and involves the community in conversations, getting another piece of this puzzle. So there's some complexity here, right? But I think we have a really, really great opportunity, and I think it's also true that if that 15,000 number is real, and that's on the horizon, like very soon on the horizon, then we've got to be careful, but we also have to be urgent. There's real need out there, and the more decisively and robustly we can respond to that need, I think the happier our citizens are going to be. So I think I took longer than Commissioner Yasasi there, but I don't know. So thank you all. I think. Does anyone have any further comments?
I think we needed so thank you for this discussion. I want to be clear on next steps. I want to make sure I don't. Okay, so we wanted to get the sense of the commission before we do work, because this is going to be a significant amount of work, even in the transition. And as you said, we want it done with excellence and thoughtfulness. So what I'm hearing from today, the next Brownfield Authority meeting is on the 22nd. We're going to proceed with that meeting. They're going to continue to do the work they've been appointed to while we receive the property. In the interim, perhaps by their second meeting, we can talk about change management and come back with a potential strategy for discussion that outlines a timeline, consideration resources, and maybe create some synergy with some of the other discussions we thought. We've also said that some of the corridor improvement authorities need expertise. So perhaps if there's a full-time expert that could help with the Land Bank Authority with 100 properties, I don't know how busy they're going to be with 100 properties, that all of them are not developable. Perhaps there's other expertise they can lend in other parts of corridors throughout the city. So we can come back with that and think about how that aligns with the budget process and present a plan, either keeping this body updated or our economic development project team.
Great, thank you, City Manager. So if we can move on now to our next briefing, and that's a discussion of the Water Master Plan and a briefing on maintenance. And James Hurt's walking up to the microphone. Mr. Hurt, thank you for being with us and briefing us. So take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners, Mayor, City Manager, City Attorney, City Clerk. James Hurt, Managing Director of Public Services. The briefing before you is an introduction to the city's water system, the history of the important asset that we have in the utility, including its service districts, regulatory monitoring and compliance, the 5-year comprehensive master plan, asset management, maintenance of the system, and capital investments. So it's a large introduction we're going to provide. Just to give you a little background, the City of Grand Rapids owns and operates the public water supply, the treatment, and distribution system. The Grand Rapids water system is the second largest community water supply in the state, supplying high-quality drinking water to 6 retail partner communities and 3 wholesale communities within portions of Ottawa and Kent counties. We'll be adding another wholesale partner later this year in Caledonia Township. The water system serves over 320,000 people across this region that has oversight by the Utility Advisory Board. This board was formed almost over 25 years ago, and along with the rate-making methodology that they use, we still use today. I currently serve as the chair of this board. The water system's mission and vision are rooted in the city's core values. The system delivers high-quality water to the region while providing a superior customer experience that enhances community health while being good stewards of this precious resource. I'm now going to introduce to you Mr. Wayne Jernberg, the Water System Manager, who's going to walk you through this presentation and clearly more knowledgeable than I am on the system. Mr. Jernberg.
Thank you, James. Morning, Commissioners. Morning, Mayor. Welcome. Great to see so many fresh faces, new faces. Haven't had a chance to work with, but I'm sure I will in the future. A little bit of history on the water system. Water system history goes back into the 1800s. 1873 was the year that the citizens voted to have a public water system in Grand Rapids. And even though the original pipes were laid before that by a private company, we still maintain some of the cast iron assets that were placed originally. Significant growth in our city occurred in 1912, or prior to 1912, leading us to build the Monroe Filtration Plant, which still stands as a building. We don't use it. It's not our asset anymore, but it was built near Caledonia and Monroe Avenue. Additional growth, source of the water at that time was the Grand River. Additional growth by 1940 and a need for more stable water source caused the city to expand our water system to pull water from Lake Michigan, building a 40-mile-long transmission main, a lakeshore pumping station, and an intake crib in Lake Michigan at that time. The new assets then pumped raw water from Lake Michigan to the Monroe Treatment Plant. Note some of the pictures that are on this slide. That is the original Colebrook pumping station that circa 1900. That building burned down and the new one was rebuilt. And the lower photo is actually the Franklin Reservoir, which is still in service today. You can see how it was being built down. It's an underground 16 million gallon reservoir that a lot of people don't realize that there's a ball field above it up at MLK Park. That's still in service today, but 16 million gallons of water, concrete reservoir. In 1962, the city moved forward with building the Lake Michigan Filtration Plant, and for the next 25 years, the Lake Michigan Filtration Plant and Monroe Filtration Plant worked together to provide water to City of Grand Rapids, as well as our regional partners in the area and in Ottawa County. By the 1980s, the Monroe plant was no longer efficient to operate, and therefore the city in the early 1990s built a second transmission main and expanded the filtration plant to a 135 million gallon per day plant, as well as building a second intake from Lake Michigan. And as we continue to grow in our regional system over the past 2 decades, the city's continued to invest in its assets, including redundant critical transmission mains, consolidation of pumping operations to more energy efficient locations, such as the Livingston Pump Station expansion that occurred in the past couple years, as well as additional investment occurred within our treatment facility recently. Some of the service metrics that we have 2 pump stations out at Lake Michigan. We pull in water via 7 pumps ranging in size from 25 to 62 million gallons per day in capacity. It is a conventional treatment system, which means it uses disinfection, flocculation, sedimentation, as well as a gravel sand filtration system. At this point, the water then has become safe and is pumped into town using 9 high service pumps ranging up to 36 million gallons per day per pump. Plant operators are monitoring the plant 24/7, 365. They also see not only what happens at the filtration plant, but they're also seeing what happens in the distribution system through the SCADA operations. All told, as Mr. Hurt mentioned, there's 1,300 miles of water main that we maintain. We also maintain 16 storage reservoirs, 11 pump stations, and we have 13 pressure districts that we monitor. An average day for us is about 36 million gallons per day of water treated. However, in the summer, that volume goes way up, typically around 70 to 75 million gallons per day. In times of drought, we've pumped over 90 million gallons per day as well. Our service area, as Mr. Hurt noted, we have 6 communities in our retail system. Retail means that we own the assets in terms of the meters and the water main that serve them. The communities that we serve in this format are Grand Rapids, Walker, Kentwood, Talmadge Township, Grand Rapids Township, and Cascade Township. We have other communities that we serve in a wholesale basis, which means simply we sell water to them through a wholesale meter. We have large portions of Ottawa County, such as Coopersville and Allendale, that we serve this way. We also serve East Grand Rapids and Ada Township. And later this year, we are going to be adding Caledonia Township as a wholesale customer. In all, we process about and maintain about 83,000 accounts on a daily basis. We serve a population of over 320,000 people, and we partner with 311 in response to 143,000 service requests on a daily basis, or on an annual basis, excuse me. We work to replace 5,000 meters on an annual basis as well. The water system has several regulatory requirements that we're required to follow. The first one, which is our basis, which is the Safe Drinking Water Act. The Safe Drinking Water Act establishes all of our base standards that we are required to test for. It's been around, this is the 50th anniversary of it, which we had a commemoration of that last month. More recently, we've had other regulatory impacts, such as the lead and copper rule, that are undergoing changes. Originally, the lead and copper rule came around in 1994, and since then, the city's been adding a corrosion control chemical to minimize the impacts of potential lead and copper being introduced into the water. In 2017, the city got out in front of new legislation that was coming, which came in 2018, which required all municipalities to replace their full lead service lines. Since 2017, the city has replaced over 7,000 lead service lines, but our work is not done. We are still working on those today, and we have about 19,000 more to go. Another issue that we face is emerging contaminants, such as PFAS. PFAS is a kind of a pain in the rear end. It's something that we don't necessarily have anything to do with, other than we have to test our raw water coming in from Lake Michigan on a quarterly basis. We're seeing it more and more in the groundwater in the area, and we have communities, our partner communities are starting to see that in some of their private groundwater wells. With that said, we are adding and extending public water main in our partner communities to address these private contaminated groundwater wells. Additionally, in regulatory monitoring compliance, EGLE is our regulatory body. So the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, they monitor us. They require us to have licensed operators on staff. There's two sets of licenses that we're required to have. A distribution operator is required to have an S license, and a system our size is required to have an S1. Our operators at our filtration plant are required to have F1 or F licenses, which means they deal more with water quality and chemistry. We are also required to have an F1 license operator there as well. All of our operators attend regular classes and training events to maintain their licensing through CEC credits. And EGLE is the body that monitors all of the exams that our operators have to take. We also receive periodic evaluations and inspections from EGLE as well as the EPA. In 2024, the EPA came through and did a field survey visit of not only our filtration plant, but also our distribution sites, and we got a glowing recommendation from them in that visit. Periodically, EGLE does do sanitary surveys for the water system, and we are due for one later this year. We are required to support monthly operating reports to EGLE. These reports basically cover all aspects of our water quality. We have 150 sites that we sample on a monthly basis in the system, and our SCADA system allows for operators to monitor real-time situations. Items that they're monitoring for and reporting include raw water turbidity readings, chemical dosage rates, filter run times, and efficiency of the filters. They're also reporting out on quarterly and annual testing with respect to metals, disinfection byproducts, organics, and other water quality parameters. One of the most important things that the water system maintains and keeps track of is our asset management plans. Asset management is a key component, and the parts of an asset management plan that we regularly update and monitor include our comprehensive master plan, risk assessments, as well as the funding and the decision-making process that goes with asset management. With respect to the comprehensive master plan, we are required to update that every 5 years. We are currently in the middle of our 2025 update right now. There's 3 segments that impact water. One is simply looking at the growth projections for our area. The other 2 segments look at our distribution system and our filtration plant. A key component of the CMP is really the calibration of the hydraulic model. Hydraulic model is a analysis that looks at the flows through the system. It's looking at pressures, it's looking at demands. It takes everything into account, and then as part of that model is developed, it looks at making sure that it's right sized and it's calibrated. It's taking into account our build volumes as well as our flow meter analysis from all of our sites, backing and basically builds the model backward from the end user all the way back to the filtration plant. Once that hydraulic model is calibrated, current future demands are inputted, and then we start looking at what our projected average day and max day flows will be in the future. Capacity assessments are looking at everything in our systems, including drinking water age, as well as our fire flow analysis. It's not uncommon to have recommendations suggesting upsizing or additional infrastructure to be added to keep up with demands. See here. We also go through a significant EPA required analysis for our cybersecurity as well as our emergency response plans. Another critical component of the CMP is a zone gating analysis. This allows us to basically break down and look at the percentage of flows that are going through our assets to each of our customer communities, and therefore break out that percentage into their rates and have them pay for that portion of those assets. One other critical component of a CMP is looking at risk assessments, which takes into account the probability of failure as well as the consequence of failure. A POF, which is a probability of failure assessment, essentially gives a risk score of potential break happening in the coming years by reviewing frequency of water main breaks, the age of the pipe, as well as the density of which the breaks happen on a given section of pipe. A consequence of failure assessment gives a risk score pertaining to the impact of the break. For example, in Grand Rapids, we look at things like impacts of pipe size, impacts to the hydraulic system, as well as impact to community operations. In 2020, keep up here. In 2020, the city worked with a consultant to develop a risk assessment.
Mr. Drummer, just for a moment, just want to put it in context. I probably should have did this earlier. So the briefing today is responsive to more holistic questions we've gotten about the reliability of our water system. So I know there's a lot of information. The first part, more historic, the breadth, scope of the system. This next part will inform how we plan for improvement and maintenance, how we respond. And I really, it took some discussion from our team to get to this part. And so I would ask that you really take a pause in some of this if you have any questions about some technical things, but I think it's going to address a lot of the questions that we asked about how we've maintained other parts of the system. And while, let me add this, while we are not speaking specifically about the water main break in the 3rd Ward that dealt specifically in the Philadelphia area, we are talking about things that could affect maintenance issues in that area and around that area. So I wanted to be clear about that. We're not going to be speaking specifically about that break.
Okay. Thank you, City Manager. So in 2020, the city worked with a consultant on a probability of failure risk assessment. This risk assessment used statistical algorithms in a base model to assess potential pipe failure and risk in our distribution system. The industry standard for this type of assessment is to look at the worst 1% of pipe in our system and develop what could be basically the probability of failure in subsequent future years. The factors that were included in that included pipe age, water main breaks, soil conditions, as well as local weather. The model did not include anything with respect to consequence of failure, simply because the technology is still developing from that perspective as we move forward. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. So what has water done with this data over the past 5 years? First, we wanted to examine sections of pipe a bit closer. And since this assessment came out, we replaced 2 miles of that pipe that was identified of the worst 1%. We have another mile of pipe that's identified that we're going to be proposing funding or requesting funding for in the future in our capital plan moving forward. Secondly, we want to know how accurate was this assessment? And this is one of the things that really caught my eye, is since 2020, we've had 397 water main breaks. Of those breaks, only 44 of them were identified in this assessment. That's 11%. Only 11%. So an 11% success rate is not a very accurate model in terms of what this consultant and what this program did for us. Clearly, it's very difficult to identify when and where a water main is going to break, but we think we can do better than 11%, okay?
Can I have a follow-up question? This image here, what does this represent?
That was the locations that were identified as that worst 1% of high risk in our system. Okay.
And did you say we do this assessment internally or externally?
This one was done in partnership with a consultant back in 2020.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So how are we going to get better? How are we going to be able to do this better? So in our 2025 CMP, we've actually purchased new software that the city will own that will allow us to do probability of failure and consequence of failure assessments in-home, or in-house, not in-home, but in-house. The software that we're going to be using is AquaTwin Asset. It's tailored. We can tailor it to fit what we consider to be our factors that best impact our community. I should know that we have been trying to do manual assessments like this for about 10 years. Very labor intensive to be able to go through all of the data when you start to look at factors that could impact or be impacted by water main breaks, such as public facilities, bridges, roads, high traffic areas. We do think by tailoring this to fit our needs, we should be able to get to a much more successful way of predicting these water main breaks. Perhaps 40 to 50% successful. We will never be able to predict all of the water main breaks, however, but we certainly think we can improve. Pairing this new risk data with also our vital streets assessment, which Mr. Berkman had talked about in one of the committee meetings earlier, we feel like this partnership will set us up for a greater ability to prioritize not only street resurfacing and reconstruction projects, but also utility projects in the future. This chart is essentially a graph of the age of our water infrastructure, our water main pipe by total length, when these pipes were installed. As you'll note that in the 1920s, between the 1920s and 1930s, there was significant growth within the city based off this chart. And as you start to look at the 1960s and 1970s, there's a lot more growth that occurs. That's when the city started to expand outside in terms of servicing partner communities like Walker, Cascade, and things like that. All told, if we were to replace all of our pipes 75 years and older, it would be a $1.5 billion investment. So decision making. So how do we make decisions on what we replace? A lot of factors are considered, our CMP being probably the most critical in our assessment, okay? That's looking at our demands and ability to meet the demands. Even though the CMP is important part of our assessment, it's somewhat limited in terms of its design specifics. We often fall back on preliminary design reports that allow us to get better estimates as well as review any other options that may be available to us. Another key factor in our decision-making process is regulatory requirements. The lead and copper rule that came about requires the replacement of lead service lines. When we're spending $10 million a year for lead service line replacements, that is money that could have been going towards other buried water main assets and things like that, but the regulatory requirements forces us and pushes that to the forefront. The city's vital streets is another aspect that helps us in our decision-making process. Any chance that we can to leverage the vital streets assets and their funding as well as our funding helps spread the cost out amongst the various groups that are involved. And as well as the CMP and the asset ratings that we have as well, that's another component that we take into account. Unfortunately, we don't always get our assets that are problematic lining up with the vital streets assets that are problematic, and therefore we have to prioritize. The decision on what projects and when are also impacted by available funding and how the project may impact rates. It's a delicate balance. I'll leave it at that. When I started in 2006, I used an estimate of $200 a foot to replace a water main in the city. Now we're looking at $1,000 a foot. It's crazy how expensive things have gotten. At this time, our estimated capital needs for FY26 through FY30 is pushing $160 million. This is the water system investment history in terms of what we've done over the past 20 to 25 years in capital funding. I want to point out a couple things on this. While it looks like things are a lot less, we did not invest as much in the first half of this chart. There's a couple reasons for that. One, it was a lot cheaper to do things. Two, the city was still doing CSO projects. CSO being the separation of the combined sewers, and the practice that the city has had is when it is a deep asset such as a sewer and they cause displacement of an asset that's higher up, the asset that is causing the displacement pays for that asset to be replaced. So we were still doing a lot of water main replacement in the first half of this chart. As we get to the second half of this chart, the economy improves, and also there becomes a lot more availability of public funding. So there's a lot more grants, loans, DWRF funding that became available to us to access and be able to do some of these projects, as well as the required investment into lead service lines. Yep.
Can you back up to that chart?
Yep.
So you're saying, however, that if you could speak a little more to your $150 million number, are you essentially saying we've been underspending by an order of magnitude for the last 20 years?
I would say that As I mentioned, it's not a true indication of what has been spent because some of the dollars that were spent or invested on water assets came at the expense of the Environmental Services Fund. Would I say that has there been times where we've had to underspend because of our financial situations? Yes, there has been situations like that.
But the top of this chart is a third of what you're saying we're going to need for next year.
I'm saying,
It's 150 million over a 5-year period.
5 years.
So that's what we're estimating. So it's
Sorry, I
about
missed that.
50 million a year for the next, excuse me, about 30 million a year. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You worried me.
We do try to, when we do work on our rate study and our capital plans, we do try to have a nominal amount of cash in there. And because of the availability of the DWRF funding, the state revolving funds, we've been able to access those, which are very, very helpful because they are a low interest loan. We're talking 2% for anywhere from 20 to 30 to 40-year loans. And those are very beneficial. Plus, a lot of those come with principal forgiveness. So those have been very beneficial, and we've been accessing those funds really for the past 15 years. How do we track our system maintenance is another question a lot of people ask. Well, we use a product called CityWorks. It ties back into our GIS system. It's not only used for water, it's used for storm, sanitary, I believe Public Works, our ELC group. I think there's a lot of city departments that use it. As I mentioned before, we've got 1,300 miles of pipe that we manage. We have 2,500 vertical assets that we're managing in this program, 14,000 hydrants and 34,000 system valves that we're responsible for maintaining. It allows us to track preventative maintenance as well as corrective maintenance, corrective being if there's a leak or a break or a manhole situation that we can get in there and correct that. Preventative means that we're going in and basically proactively looking at things. So that means going in, doing inspections on our tanks, going in and operating valves, making sure that valves are operational. If they need to grease any of the gears or anything like that, they have that ability to do that as well. This particular slide I want to call out, this is not a city vehicle in the hole. Okay, this is a contractor that hit one of our hydrants many, many years ago. And it's one of those things that sometimes we have to deal with. It's not uncommon that we have had situations where contractor vehicles have fallen into excavations. But bare utilities, there are issues. You can have issues with those. We are not perfect. We know that. Lead service line leaks, we have about 250 what we call emergency leaks per year. Okay, that means that any portion of the service line from the water main to the house can develop a leak. And sometimes that leak is on the lead portion that comes into the house as well, because there is a portion of it that comes up prior to the meter. So we're working to replace those. When that leak comes in, we are doing a full replacement with the city doing the public portion and our contractors doing the private portion. Another problematic issue are water main breaks. And I've got a chart later on that'll kind of show the history over the past 10 years of our water main breaks. Primary issues for water main breaks are freeze-thaw cycles, cold weather, warm weather, rapidly going back and forth, and corrosion is another one. We've begun to tackle the corrosion issue in the Grand Rapids area for the years to come by going to zinc-coated ductile iron pipe. This is something that's only been around for the last 10 years, but basically has zinc coating on the outside that basically becomes a sacrificial anode to prevent the corrosion from getting to the strength of the pipe. Power outages are another huge issue. We have dual feeds to most of our pump stations. We have generators at most of our pump station now, but we've had to invest in it over the past 10 to 15 years. Putting in, like our Franklin pump station, which I'll talk about a little bit later. The Franklin pump station, we just redid that. We put in a 900 kW generator in there with an automatic transfer switch to basically it goes into operation if the power goes out. This is the water main break table that I referred to. There's a lot of information here. I'm going to take you over to the right hand of the column where it says average number of breaks by month. This is broken down by month so you can see that our problematic months are December, January, and February. Cold weather, freeze-thaw cycles. We average about 66 water main breaks a year. That's really not that bad compared to what the national average is. We look at about 1 break per 18 miles of pipe in our system. The national average is closer to 1 break every 6 miles of pipe. So we're actually doing quite well. System emergencies. So I want to talk a little bit about what our staff does when there are emergencies. We have, like you mentioned before, the operators, they can see and feel the system. Okay, they know the pressures, they know the flow rates. They can see, they get alarms when there's a pressure issue or an electrical issue. We have mechanics, electricians, and our techs are all on call should there be an issue that the operators see at a pump station in town. Keep in mind, our operators are out at Lake Michigan, and then we also have, as I mentioned, the tanks and the pump stations here in town. So there is a difference there. We have mechanics in town that respond to these things. For customer emergencies is another one. So if there's a plumbing leak inside the home, we have 311 or after-hours call service that allows us to get dispatched, a service worker to get out there to get the water shut off. These after-hours call center people also take in calls for water main breaks, hit hydrants. Crews will be out there as quickly as they possibly can to first triage the issue, identify the valves that have to be operated, and then they're mobilizing a crew at all hours of the day to get out there and fix that water main break. Large-scale outages, we have the ability to use reverse 311, which uses our data and our billing system to go backwards and contact the customers through email. We also use the alert systems through your cell phone, like iPause and things like that, that allow us to get emergencies out should there be a larger impacted area. Some of our recent investments include, as I mentioned, the zinc-coated ductile iron mains since 2016, $3 million in PRV investments. PRV means a pressure regulating valve. So as you have pressure water and it goes down into like a river bottom, we control the pressure on that so it doesn't overpressurize and cause issues. We've done, as I mentioned, a lot of the electrical feed improvements, backup power generation, $40 million so far, and then some for lead service line replacements. And just in the past, since 2020, we've invested $100 million in water main replacements. Also in 2022, we invested $15 million to replace the upflow clarifiers. I know Commissioner Robbins and Commissioner Perdue were out at the water plant early last year, got a chance to see some of those plate clarifiers in action. And we only used there's four upflow clarifier basins. Two of them have been decommissioned. The other two got converted. That allowed us more capacity and more efficiency in our treatment operations. Additional investments, Wilson Pump Station, tank upgrades, structural improvements there, as well as pump improvements. I mentioned the Franklin Pump Station. That had assets dating back to 1940 to 1950 in terms of pumps that needed to be replaced. We added VFDs on those. A VFD is a variable frequency drive, which allows for the speed of the pump to be throttled down to meet the demands in the system. It's also an energy-saving piece of equipment. We also did something similar out at the Lake Plant in 2020, where we replaced 4 high-service pumps in VFDs. And then most recently, the Livingston Pump Station project, which expanded the Livingston Pump Station up on Belknap Hill and the reservoir there, and allowed us also to build redundant water mains to it, and then allows us now to decommission Colebrook and eventually hopefully sell that property. Coming investments, important things that we have on the horizon include $9 million at the Lake Michigan filtration plant for chemical containment and carbon feed improvements. Carbon is used for taste and odor. As algae dies off in Lake Michigan, it basically gives off a musty odor. If we don't treat for that, it will show up as a smell in your tap water, basically July, August, September, sometimes as the water gets warmer out in Lake Michigan. We've got $8 million associated with water main and lead service line replacements planned for Burton from Division all the way to Kalamazoo. That's almost 2 miles of pipe. Part of that was in that asset for a risk assessment that we did earlier, not the full 2 miles, obviously. We've got water main in Boston that we're looking at doing with lead service lines, as well as probably the worst street in Grand Rapids. Godfrey is planned for some improvements by the Factory Yards development, as well as $8 million in this coming year just for lead service line replacements. So in summary, we are doing our very best, and we believe that we're achieving our primary goal of being with excellent customer service and excellent water quality. The water main breaks and the service leaks, they happen. We can't prevent all of them, and it's really not realistic to predict all of them, but we're going to certainly try to get better at it in terms of using the programs that are available to us in our technology and our CMP as we move forward. We want continued support from citizens and local and state governments for asset replacement investments. We can't do this without rate impacts or grant dollars or low interest loans and things like that. We need that funding to help mitigate what those rate impacts might be as we reinvest in our system. And then obviously we want to continue to develop that increased balance between surface and buried assets, conditions, and prioritizing projects. I'll just say this picture, it's probably one of my favorite pictures. This is what we used to call the Bat Cave or the dungeon outside Colebrook at Colebrook, Monroe, and Ottawa. That was a chamber that was under the road there that was extremely scary because you could actually see the cars driving above you through the grates and stuff like that. That was basically a 100-year-old chamber that got replaced. It's long gone, and it was all replaced with that roundabout project up there a few years back.
Cool.
Thank you.
Well, thanks. I have lots of geeky questions, but I'm not going to ask them since probably a lot of us are looking forward to lunch. But thanks. That was a great comprehensive overview. Any comments or questions from my colleagues? Commissioner Kilgore.
Yeah, can you further expand upon the partnership with Vital Streets a little bit? I think it's effective, and we approved, the previous commission approved a ton of projects for Vital Streets. So just for the public, can you further expand upon the partnership, because it's a pretty effective partnership?
I've been doing the capital budget for water for my entire time with the city, so going on 19 years now. I started tracking the partnership in terms of what projects water was funding, in terms of our investments into street projects, understanding that before Vital Streets there was no real dedicated funding other than coupons, we call coupons, which are grants. But then since I think it was 2015, we've worked very well. Commissioner and I see coupons. Since 2015, we've really worked hard to communicate and have transparency with the engineering department and Vital Streets. We do meet on a monthly basis, really the second half of the year, basically from July to December. We meet on a regular basis with the engineering, and it's not just water, it's all of the public works departments are meeting with engineering. They basically do their best to give us what the next 5 years look like in terms of Vital Streets, roto-mills, reconstructs, and we basically look at those and try to pair it up with where we have the greatest risk of our own assets. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to balance that a little bit more and maybe come up with our own algorithm that kind of balances the buried asset with the surface asset as well. It's difficult with Vital Streets because there is a requirement for the ward equity and things like that, and the precinct equities and stuff like that, and it doesn't necessarily align with some of the conditions that we have with assets, but we do our very best to try to partner and leverage each other's assets.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Belcheck.
I just want to say thank you for everything that the environmental services team does and water plant and whatnot. I agree. We actually talked briefly at our community development meeting about the fact that Vital Streets is doing a lot of work and the work that we're doing. So thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Kilgore. But if I may ask and or elevate, it's my understanding that some of these jobs in monitoring the water system and becoming an operator are great opportunities for young people, and that there has been some work done in your department to try to attract that. And I just want to put that out there because I think that these are important, especially as we think about how are we maintaining systems and changing our systems from the old to the new, as this is a community conversation we care about, right?
Absolutely. And you're talking about the Water Career Program that is near and dear to our hearts. I know my counterpart, Mr. Oots, as well. We meet on a regular basis to talk about that. We've actually now in the process of expanding to make it regional. I think it was last year at this time we secured the $1 million grant partnership with GRCC, where the city's getting a portion of that money to employ, young people to come into the water and wastewater industry to be operators and things like that. At this point, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I'd be glad to come back and share some of those numbers with you in terms of where we're at in terms of employing people that have come through the program. It's been a very successful program, and it's the model for state and nationally now too.
And there is need for this where we have a shortage in this industry, right?
Yep. I forgot to mention, any of those that have not been at the water plant or would like to tour the filtration plant, there's a standing invitation. Please reach out to myself or the city manager. We will get you hooked up. I know that we had Commissioner Robbins and Commissioner Pududu out last year. You're always welcome to come out, take a walk through. It's about a 2-hour tour thereabouts.
Can we bring grandkids?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
This looks like my grandson Fred's idea of a good time.
I would recommend probably in the summertime. We do have an employee day in the summertime that they're allowed to come in, and we have a picnic and stuff like that. So, yeah, I'd recommend the summertime. That way you can get over on the other side, and they can get down to the beach and the water too.
Mayor.
So thanks.
Mayor?
I think it's the end. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Purdue.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was really, really helpful, really great background. This is a very complex system, and I just am so thankful for all of your expertise. We do know that, and we're not talking about any specific scenarios today, but we do know that what's top of mind for a lot of people is when something happens, trying to understand what happens, the extent of it, and what they should do. Sometimes when we do have breaks, sometimes there's boil advisory, sometimes there's not. Is there anything that's pre-prepared or that you can share today that kind of outlines almost like an if-then, like what people should expect and what some of those different advisories or breaks mean, and how do you share and communicate the extent of the damage or the threat, if you will?
Most water main breaks, most leaks are what I would consider localized events, where it's usually 2 or 3 valves to shut it down. And even then, the crews are not completely depressurizing the system. They want to maintain some level of water pressure and positive pressure on the system to avoid having what we would call a cross-contamination event where contaminants could be pulled back into the pipe. With the events that happened last year, in my time, I think I can probably count on one hand the number of times that we've had large-scale boil water events. The reason for that is because there has been depressurization in the system. For example, the one that occurred on the northeast side last year where we had the bottle distribution event, that particular situation, we went back and we actually ran our hydraulic model after the fact to see, okay, we actually took the pressures from our SCADA system and plugged them back into our hydraulic model to see, okay, what was the actual extent and full area that went to essentially a zero pressure condition. And it was a fair chunk of the second ward is really what it was. It wasn't the entire second ward, but it was a large portion of it. Those are the type of situations when we start to get calls of no water at a tap or something like that. That to me is alarm red flag, and it's going to likely lead to a boil water. Now, if water is shut off because of obviously termination for bills or a leak or something like that, we're obviously not going to do a boil water for that.
Right. Thank you. And I just want to know, in the last quarter of last year, we did a fiscal committee in this body, the full commission approved investments to upgrade our SCADA system. So I don't know if you want to add anything about that and kind of what that means for really maintaining the system.
Yeah, so this is going to be essentially like a 2-year-long project. We did bring in a consultant. We haven't identified what the future program is. It's more in a fact-finding and discovery phase right now for the consultants. We're looking about a 1 to 2 year project. It does have a significant focus on cybersecurity and making sure that we're isolated from potential bad actors, because that is happening out there. And I'm sure if you were to talk to the IT department, they're aware of it. We get a lot of CISA notifications. There's a lot of upgrades that have to go with our controllers and things like that, our PLCs in terms of our logic and our panels in terms of how we communicate. But the way that we're set up right now, we are safe, but we are looking to modernize and get it as far into the future as we possibly can. It's not cheap. It's not a cheap project, but it's a very important project, because if you were to think of the bodies that would have to be in place to be out operating, starting, stopping pumps manually at pump stations versus to be able to do it electronically from one desk, it's a huge savings for us.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments? Great. Well, okay, so we are going to adjourn and move into closed session, and the commission will move to the law library. Thank you all for coming.